Hi, Jake Williams from Rendition Infosec here. I saw some exciting news today in the Washington Post talking about a suspect having been identified in the CIA Vault 7 leak case. Of course, we want to, highlight that anybody, of course, is innocent until proven guilty. And I'd like to talk about some of the specifics in the case here. However, it is interesting that this has kind of come to light that they've actually announced suspicion about that publicly now. And I would say that a couple of key facts in the story, which we'll of course link in the link in the comment section down there on the video, is that this gentleman Joshua Adam Schulte was a full-time employee, not a contractor. Remember, or you may recall, that some of the Vault 7 leak investigations were focusing on contractors rather than full-time employees, and I'm not entirely certain for the reason for that, other than I think probably history, right? As we look at some of the more recent leaks, certainly Snowden, as well as Hal Martin, were both contractors, and I guess maybe that's some of the, where there's smoke, there's fire kind of thing. Contractors do tend to, move in and out of groups in the government, probably a little bit faster than permanent employees too. Maybe that high turnover was considered, not entirely sure. It is interesting to note that this is possibly a case of anchoring bias. We talk a lot about bias in CTI, cyber threat intelligence, and this may have been a case of anchoring bias, or even anecdotal bias, where they saw previous contractors or contractors previously being involved in these type of leaks and said, it's probably a contractor again. I obviously don't know, can't put myself in the mindset of the investigators, but that's certainly a possibility. It's worth noting that Schulte was disgruntled, or described as disgruntled, complained to the CIA Office of General Counsel, as well as congressional oversight committees, and left the CIA in 2016 on what was described as poor terms. So that's kind of interesting, right? Washington Post describes that there. As an analyst, I might kind of step back and mention that it's not necessarily the case that he leaked because, and again, there's no, at this point, no case or even formal charge that he leaked, just a person of interest that he leaked the Vault 7 data. But it is kind of interesting. I wonder how much confirmation bias plays into the he's disgruntled, therefore maybe he, as a result of being disgruntled, maybe he's the source of the leaks. Not entirely certain. Regardless, he's being held in a Manhattan jail, again, according to the Washington Post, due to some other charges relating to child pornography. Again, there he's charged, not convicted. It's important to remember that innocent until proven guilty. He mentions that he built a shared server that 50 to 100 people had access to during the time frame that, again, the facts in the child pornography case are pretty light at the moment. I haven't read the indictment. Again, this is just, kind of a, more of an immediate reaction. I do intend to read the indictment, definitely to see what the evidence is specifically there, what has been factored and what hasn't. But again, the fact that he mentions 50 to 100 people had access to the shared server that he built to share movies and other media files, may speak to, if that's where they found the child pornography, and that seems to be what he's asserting, who knows there, who put it there, or there's one of those 50 to 100 people, him, or some other party that he's unaware that has illicit access there. The article says that he worked at the NSA before the CIA. This one is really, really interesting to me because I've long held a suspicion that it could be possible that the source of the shadow brokers and the Vault 7 leaks were possibly the same person. It doesn't say where he worked there specifically, but man, that would really be interesting to find out that indeed he had access to some of the data and tools leaked through the shadow brokers outlet, as well as the Vault 7 data leaked through WikiLeaks. Couple of other pieces here that they mention. They mention that there was no evidence found in his apartment or in his devices relating to the transmission of classified data or even retention of classified data to WikiLeaks. They are investigating his usage of Tor, and I find that interesting, although I do want to point out that for probably one of the first times on the record, we have decent statements from a prosecutor surrounding Tor. If you follow any legal cases, you know Tor is typically seen as the devil. Basically folks come in and they say, well, this individual used a encrypted encrypted service that is intentionally designed to obfuscate your location, an obscure location. A lot of it is guilt by association at that point, right? So I don't think that's the case here. The prosecutor even mentions in a statement statement to the Washington Post that Tor can be used for many things, and the use of Tor is not indicative of guilt. I would say this is a very mature statement compared to what we saw with Reality Winner. I want to be very clear that I don't necessarily support, don't support leaking in any way, shape, or form. Don't necessarily support what Winner did, but during her bail hearing, it was mentioned that she used Tor, and that was one of the things used, or one of the arguments used, to try to keep her, basically to deny her bail, was that she would use these, or had a proclivity to use these encrypted networks that the government wouldn't be able to trace, and didn't that show that she was super advanced hacksaw, elite hacksaw? That said, there's no evidence that was found, in the execution of the search warrant specific to the Vault7, and I assume they're also looking for any classified data for that matter. So I think we could probably rule out as well, since he hasn't been charged, the shadow brokers, right? There's also no mention of device encryption, which I think is kind of interesting because, I can't hear about a search warrant being issued for somebody anymore without hearing the going dark argument, and I don't see that anywhere yet. Now again, to be fair, he hasn't been indicted at this point for any of the, CIA Vault7 leaks. All we know is there's an absence of evidence, but we haven't yet seen prosecutors talk openly about, well, we're having trouble getting into some devices, and that's yet to be seen. I would expect if that were the case, we would probably hear some of that, hear some of the language. The other thing that's fairly significant here is it is pretty abnormal for prosecutors to come out and offer any details of a case if they suspect other people involved, right? So from where I sit, this appears to be that or appears to me at least, that they believe Schulte was acting alone. But, again, there's no indictment here, it sounds like, because there's not enough evidence to secure an indictment. At this point, it sounds like he simply remains a person of interest who's being held on unrelated charges, right? Again, it's also not clear, and again, I have to clarify that I haven't read the indictment yet for the child pornography case. As soon as I get a hold of that, I absolutely will, and we'll comment on that publicly as well. Again, it's not clear whether they found yet or not yet clear whether they found the child pornography as a result of trying to identify, basically serving that search warrant, executing that search warrant for his, basically looking for that Vault7 data. Again, I'm always fascinated by these cases, and I think this one is, again, definitely a very, very important one to follow, given the magnitude of the data released. It would be a really interesting piece to kind of put this one to bed, but it doesn't sound like we're anywhere near there yet. Although, if you want to come back to or come down to brass tacks, this has been open now for well over a year. I guess we could push with almost a year and a half with these Vault7 leaks going on, and it is actually refreshing to hear that there's actual movement in the case. I'll tell you that if I were a betting man, I'd have bet against any movement happening in these cases, but I'm happy to actually see that. Right? So anyway, I just wanted to provide a couple of comments there on that, anyway, Jake Williams from Rendition Infosec signing off. Enjoy.